Hello and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching ETV English Language with Zanusam Binyam Gatana. Thank you for joining us and do stay tuned. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and Zinnash Tayacho, together with a ministerial delegation, have arrived in the North African city of Algiers for a working visit. Prime Minister Abiy and his delegation have been accorded a warm welcome by Ayman Ben Abdelrahman, Prime Minister of Algeria, upon their arrival at Algiers. PM Abiy will discuss with President Tebboune on bilateral issues of mutual concern and visit various development projects in the country. Meanwhile, Amhara, Afar, Oromia, Harar, Gambella, Benishangul Gumuz, and Southwest Ethiopian People's Regional States call international community to condemn TPLF's continued attacks on their people. In a statement, the Amhara regional state said the terrorist TPLF has been committing atrocities on the people of Amhara living all over the country. The terrorist group committed ethnic-based attacks, massacre on the Amhara people, and looted and vandalized properties of the people, the statement said. The terrorist group inflicted 288 billion birr damage on facilities and infrastructure on the region during its last invasion, the statement shows. The statement said the terrorist group has opened fresh war on the people of the region, undermining the peace efforts by the region and the federal government at large. The regional government called on the international community to denounce the terrorist TPLF for its continued attack on the region. Similarly, the Afar regional state issued a statement on continued atrocities TPLF is committing on the people of the region. The statement said the TPLF group has massacred people in the region, including children, women, and elderly. The group destroyed many public and religious institutions in the region, it is stated. It is in its renewed attack, the TPLF is targeting innocent civilians of the region, calling the international community to denounce such an atrocious act. Meanwhile, Oromia, Gambella, Benishangul Gumuz, Southwest Peoples, Somali, Sidama, and Southern Peoples regional states vowed to support the legal measures taken by the federal government. The states underscored the federal government has the responsibility to protect its people and sovereignty of the nation unless the terrorist group stop the large-scale brutal attack. In other news, the New York Times has been urged to more carefully present the facts of the conflict in northern Ethiopia. This came when the Ethiopian embassy in Washington, D.C. reacted to a Twitter article regarding the conflict in Tigray, which appeared on the magazine. Tigris Unisa has compiled the following account. Let's take a look.
It said the embassy recognizes the New York Times as a leader in ensuring the international community is objectively informed about the facts of the present conflict. However, the embassy is concerned that the New York Times article of August 24, 2022, entitled "Fighting Erupts in Northern Ethiopia, Shattering Ceasefire," missed that mark both in the body of the article and its "Understand the War in Ethiopia" section. Principally, the article fails to acknowledge that TPLF forces rebelliously instigate the conflict in November 2022 by attacking various Ethiopian National Defense Forces based in Tigray. The U.S. government acknowledged this fact when the then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and the then Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs Tibor Nagy condemned the TPLF's attack on Ethiopia and Eritrea.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo met Tuesday with Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed in Addis Ababa, where the two men discussed a number of key issues.
The TPLF leadership had at the time also admitted this fact. Yet again, while the Ethiopian government calls for and is ready for unconditional peace talks anywhere, anytime, and on any subject, the TPLF refused to sit for a negotiation and reignites the war by attacking the National Defense Forces position in Amhara and Afar regions in multiple fronts. Worse, the article suggests that Prime Minister Abiy began the military campaign out of political malice. Personification of the conflict is inappropriate. The Prime Minister has a sacred obligation to preserve the national unity, territorial integrity, and sovereignty of Ethiopia by responding to a blatant attack on its National Defense Force. A sharper contrast could not be drawn between a duly elected federal government and a rebellious political party than the TPLF stealing of fuel from the world Food Programme, WFP, this week.
This morning, on August 24th, a World Food Programme warehouse in Mekele was forcibly entered by Tigrayan forces who took 12 fuel trucks, tankers, with 570,000 liters of fuel. The team on the ground unsuccessfully tried to prevent this looting. These stocks of fuel were to be used solely for humanitarian purposes, with the distribution of food, fertilizer, and other emergency relief items. This loss of fuel will impact humanitarian operations in supporting communities in all of northern Ethiopia.
Compared to the government of Ethiopia's progressive partnership with the WFP and others to facilitate access to humanitarian resources, including fuel, for the people of Tigray, Amhara, Afar, and across Ethiopia, since the government unilaterally declared a humanitarian truce in March 2022. The embassy implored the New York Times to more carefully present the facts of the conflict in Tigray moving forward. Inaccuracies like those presented on August 24 risk embolden further aggression in Ethiopia and other parts of the world where democracy is under threat. Your readers deserve to know the truth about the causes of this conflict and accurate reflection of the current developments.
Welcome back. You're watching this news hour with the news. I'm Binyam Ganawa. Moving on. The Biden administration is being criticized for being reluctant to condemn TPLFs for using children as a cannon fodder. The renowned political science scholar in California State University, Professor Alamayo Gabriel-Mariam, said the Biden administration has kept silent on TPLF's forced conscription and use of child soldiers in a war front. Terrorist TPLF has been driving children to war to use them as a cannon fodder, calling the U.S. government and the international community at large to categorically denounce such an act he described as a war crime. Meanwhile, in our trending story, to tell us more on this point, I'm joined here in the studio by Demis Mokrao, an editor from ETV English Language. And good morning, Demis.
Good morning, Binyam.
It's very nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So now we are going to talk about what has happened over the past hours in the social media and regarding the war that has been, going on from the onset. The terrorist TPLF obviously has been using children as a cannon fodder for the war aggression, and this has been drawing the attention of many people, including the international community. So as far as this point is concerned, what is happening in the social media platform? Would you please briefly tell us on that?
Okay. Thanks for that point, actually, Bini. Actually, it's not a strange thing using child soldiers in a battlefield by TPLF. Last year in 2021, we saw that TPLF was using child soldiers in battlefields, which was actually condemned by the Ethiopian National Defense Force and many other concerned personalities across the world. This year, it's always that since March, there's a unilateral, humanitarian truce by the Ethiopian government to cease fire and to bring TPLF and other concerned affiliated groups into peace talk. But it was denied last week, and TPLF waged an actual war in some part of Amhara and in the border areas of Afar as well. So ever since that time, some pictures are going viral on the social media, which clearly shows children are in the battlefront used by TPLF. That is actually condemned by some renowned personalities. I was, looking into Twitter this morning and yesterday as well. There are pictures which clearly show that TPLF is using those child soldiers. If our director shows us those pictures from Twitter, we can possibly see who are condemning those child soldiers. As we can see on the screen, you see this video clearly shows young children are really gathered somewhere in a location in Tigray, and they are briefed by TPLF mentors to make themselves ready for war. As you see, clearly the picture speaks for itself. Those children are young, and you can simply notice it from their faces. Mm-hmm. So this actually attracts, as I said before, international condemnation from concerned personalities, while concerned authorities from the UN and other countries are keeping silent, which we were known by, which they are self-proclaimed, I think. They claim that they are, contending for the right of civilians and childs whatsoever. They say for so many years. For instance, the UN High Commission for Human Rights never utter a word concerning this issue. The UNICEF, the UN Child Fund, never utter a word concerning this issue. And other countries as well, for instance, the US and other countries, which they say are standing for human rights, this time turn a deaf ear to this issue.
Yeah.
The implication is clear. When they are becoming another wing of propaganda for the TPLF, what we can say that, or in other words, they are, if they keep silent, they are endorsing the evil act of TPLF.
Yeah.
If they do not publicly oppose this kind of act, it means they are endorsing the act by the TPLF.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to see those pictures from Twitter. If our director also shows some tweets from the social media, Ambassador Taye Asqar-Selassie seriously opposed. Children are being recruited in Tigray for to become the common fodder, and many more others. Renowned personalities from Tigray, for instance, the independent journalist Hermia Laragawi, also voiced her concern against TPLF, that this is a brutal act by the terrorist group to bring children into the battle front is not acceptable by any means under the international law as well.
Yeah. How do you see that from the international law perspective? Because they are a concerned body who can protect and stand for the rights of individuals. And what's happening in Tigray is totally against the international law. So are there any means by which we can actually exercise to keep the freedom of the human rights?
Yes. The kind of silence we have been watching from across the globe is they wanting those international community is not paying attention when the right of children is abused in Tigray. Firstly, because they may support, they are expressing their support to the TPLF. On other points, they are also expressing their position to the Ethiopian government. Perhaps it's actually a kind of analysis you could probably put forward, depending on the situation on the ground. So what we have to do is, I think, all concerned bodies from Ethiopia, be the media or other stakeholders, must expose this heinous act of the TPLF to the international community, while those international concerned actors are keeping silent on the issue.
Interesting. Another fact is from the onset of the war, the Ethiopian government, its people have expressed strong commitment showing the fact that they are ready to hold peace. However, the terrorist TPLF, it is typical to refuting these procedures. What is the implication there?
Yeah, the Ethiopian government has been expressing its commitment to maintain peace talks with TPLF and other affiliated forces with TPLF. The government is still expressing its solid position that war cannot solve the northern Ethiopia crisis by no means. So we've been hearing this commitment from the Ethiopian government, but TPLF never show any kind of will to bring things on the table and to make a kind of peace talk. The government demands unconditional peace talk with TPLF, even at this very juncture, while TPLF is attacking some part of the country, defying the call from the government still calls peace is the only solution to the way out for the current crisis happening in that area.
All right. Thank you, Demis Mokria, I wish we could say a lot of things, but we got against time. It's very nice having you here. Thank you for the updates.
Thank you so much, Bin.
All right. In other news, the American political economic analyst Lawrence Freeman said TPLF's third round of war rely on outside supports. Talking to Ethiopian news agency, Lawrence Freeman said TPLF's new attack hoping it receives support from various parties who want Ethiopians failure. Johannes Fanton has compiled the following story from Ethiopian news agency. Let's take a look.
Lawrence Freeman, an American political economy analyst, said that the rebel group TPLF launched the third round offensive attack, hoping an outside support coming from the region and internationally. The analyst also convinced that there are conversations going on with the TPLF to permanently destabilize Ethiopia.
But I am convinced 100% that the TPLF would not be so emboldened as to launch a new round of warfare, which they're going to lose, but it's going to result in more destruction. They would not launch this effort without some kind of signal of support coming from outside of Ethiopia. This is very dangerous. And I would call on all international nations who claim to support democracy in Africa that they now come out clearly, vocally, demonstrably, and denounce any more armed attacks against the elected government of the nation of Ethiopia.
Explaining the support of outsiders to TPLF, Freeman said that there was a plane traveling into Tigray which was not authorized by Ethiopian airspace. The plane transporting weapons to the terrorist TPLF is the property of Ethiopia's historical enemies and was shot down by the heroic Air Force for violating the country's airspace. For Freeman, this clearly indicates that there is a desire of outside forces encouraging TPLF to continue the conflict intended to weaken the central government of Ethiopia.
The whole purpose of destabilizing Ethiopia is to weaken the central government. That's the geopolitical aim of the so-called rules-based order, is they want governments that are that can be manipulated by them and that can take orders from the Western oligarchy, and they have not, they don't believe that the Ethiopia should be one united nation, and they support ethnicity, and they're supporting the activities, either directly or indirectly, of the TPLF to continue its war to weaken the government of Ethiopia.
Freeman underscored that the motives are essentially in the long term, making sure that Ethiopia is weakened and destabilized by ethnicity. The destabilization effort against Ethiopia have a geopolitical aim, and there are forces that want a government they can manipulate and take order from.
Now, why haven't leaders, why hasn't President Biden, why hasn't Secretary of State Blinken on his recent trip to Africa, why hasn't Linda Thomas-Greenfield, the ambassador to the UN, who was also in Africa the first week of August, why haven't they come out and called for the disarming of the TPLF? Why haven't they made clear that Tigray is not a nation? There's only one nation, the nation of Ethiopia. If you want to change that, then you have to change that in the next election, as we're telling people in the United States who are committed to violence against the United States government. And there's no word on that. Now, clearly, the TPLF would not be able to exist in the condition they are and control Tigray in the way they do without outside support.
The analysts called on nations who claim to support democracy in Africa to come out now and clearly and equivocally denounce any war on the elected government of Ethiopia.
Meanwhile, Tigrayan journalist Hermela Haragawi urged the international community to cross-check whether the humanitarian aid is properly addressed to the needy in Tigray region. The remark came during Haragawi's interview with TRT World as to her TPLF is redirecting humanitarian aid for its war purpose. Shegoy Matao has compiled the following story. Take a look.
Rejecting the peace talk given by the Ethiopian government, the TPLF has resumed a third-round war in Afar and Amhara regions. In an interview with the TRT World, Hermela Haragawi, an Ethiopian Tigrayan journalist, underlined that the recent World Food Programme announcement of the pillage of fuel by the TPLF is an indication that the group's consistent use of humanitarian aid delivered by the international community to its war purpose.
The TPLF, the Tigray People's so-called Liberation Front, has a practice of creating crises for the people of Tigray like it did when it started this war, and then taking the aid that it gets from the international community and repurposing it for war. What we saw this week was absolutely outrageous. The UN World Food Program said TPLF militias took 12 UN fuel tankers, 500,000 liters of fuel, and then broke the 5 months truce that you mentioned and restarted war. The Ethiopian government has actually held up its part of the bargain, stuck with the truce, allowed unfettered humanitarian aid access to go into Tigray. There was Claire Neville from World Food Program was on TRT a couple of weeks ago saying aid has been flowing into Tigray since April. The Ethiopian government has said they are willing to have talks without preconditions. But instead, once again, we saw TPLF resort to war. We saw them redirecting humanitarian aid to war.
Aragawi also indicated that, according to the UN, this time last year, about 1,000 UN trucks went into Tigray, didn't come back, as they were carrying TPLF militias into the neighboring Amhara and Afar regions.
This time last year, about 1,000 UN trucks went into Tigray, according to the UN Chief of Mission in the capital of Ethiopia, and they didn't come back until they were carrying TPLF militias into the neighboring Amhara and Afar region.
Concerning the recent comments by the World Health Organization chief Tedros Adhanom, she demonstrated that Adhanom is using his position to speak for the TPLF, not for the people of Tigray.
It's absolutely outrageous. He is using his position on the as World Health Organization director to actually speak for the TPLF and not the people of Tigray. What we need is peace in this country. And he is abusing his position to speak for the militias and this ethno-fascist group as opposed to the people. For the people.
The journalist called on the UN and the international community to regulate humanitarian aid in Tigray, to reach out to the needy and stand with the Ethiopian government to safeguard the people of Tigray.
In a similar story, the TPLF and its allies have continued disseminating fake news in connection with the recent airstrike, which has only targeted the TPLF military campaign. Recently, the TPLF lobbyists are sensationalizing the conflict with a smear campaign against the government. Haftam Washagre has compiled the following story. Let's take a look.
The federal government discloses that the TPLF has already launched a third-round attack on Wednesday by firing heavy artillery in Afar and Amhara states. Contrary to the hard fact on the ground, the TPLF cliques ran wild and misinforms the international community that it was actually Addis Ababa which launches the attack. However, when news of TPLF's cruel pillage on the warehouse of the World Food Program in Mekelle filled the airwaves, the TPLF stood dead on its track. The federal government's airstrike provides another opportunity for the TPLF to come up with another media stunt saying that the airstrike fired bombs which struck through a kindergarten, killing children. It's to be recalled that the government made clear that residents had to distance themselves from TPLF's military facilities, which people know very well. The government gave Tigrayan every conceivable chance to flee before the strike began. Even then, the airstrikes only hit their selected targets as opposed to civilian areas. The TPLF's fake news is a barefaced lie given the fact that all schools in the Tigray state have long been shut, and certainly kindergartens were no exceptions. It goes without saying that most of the international and even continental media outlets simply picked the wild accusations against Addis Ababa that the TPLF came up with and simply add rapid news analysis. If the federal government of Ethiopia is responsible, it could have bombed the facilities without bothering to issue a warning statement. The TPLF seems to be heavily losing on international front as some of its acts of aggression are laid bare and the international community, unlike the past, is seeking all the right questions. Meanwhile, the government has continued to reiterate that it's never too late to give peace a chance.
You're still watching at this news hour, and now in a similar story, the TPLF resumed its war of aggression for another round to dismantle Ethiopia. The group risked the lives of many Tigrayans and Ethiopians in the previous war. Talking to ETV, Jeff Pierce, historian, author and journalist, exposed the devilish act of the TPLF. He also called upon friends of Ethiopians to voice the Ethiopian interest in a new social media. Shaggai Mata once again compiles for a story.
Jeff Pierce, a historian, author and journalist, is known for relentlessly exposing atrocities on the people of Amhara and Afar committed by the TPLF. Talking to ETV, the historian said the TPLF began war with adjacent regions to commit another atrocity, otherwise it will face serious protests from the people of Tigray.
The word is that they are prepping to create another one of their atrocity actions that the Western media can jump on and play up, which will give them another excuse to do something. We've seen this before with the frozen bodies that suddenly go down to rivers and get shot at the same time, which is ridiculous. And apparently they're trying to do the same thing again. I would not be at all surprised if when they try, Lucy Casa is reporting on it because she goes back and forth and plays both sides now. So that's sort of the deal that I'm hearing. They have to do this because unless they have perpetual war, well, they're in deep trouble because otherwise their own people, Tigrayans, are fleeing their area in droves, trying to get away from them.
Regarding Tedros Adhanom, Director General of the World Health Organization, Pierce stated that Adhanom is a huge danger to public health from the many disappearances of Amharas to the deaths of millions by COVID-19 pandemic across the globe.
He's directly implicated in millions of Amhara disappearing off the just into thin air, off the rolls of the census, plus scores of women getting forced sterilization and contraceptives without informed consent. From the Washington Post, if you want to play the Western media card, they were reporting on him sucking up to China at the start of the COVID crisis. And the reason why he did this was because he thought that they would be on their side in terms of the TPLF propaganda and the struggle. And then he discovered, nope, there's no allegiance there. He put millions of people around the world at risk. And we don't know how many people possibly died because of this man's incompetence and his corruption. He changed his tune very quickly as the COVID pandemic situation escalated to save his own skin. But yeah, this guy is a huge danger to public health.
The author finally urged friends of Ethiopia to voice the Ethiopian cause in a new social media tactic. This, he said, is because the momentum of the No More movement was discontinued.
The No More movement was organized along the model of the Black Lives Matter movement, which means that it franchised out so that everybody could do their own thing in separate cities. And that was fine, but it didn't allow for the momentum built and then it sort of dissipated. We need something new. Now, the thing is, what they've done, and they also attacked the No More movement, people like William Fungus Davison and others attacked it as being some kind of outgrowth of the Ethiopian government. I happen to know that's a damn lie because I happen to know all three founders, at least two of them I've had multiple conversations with. I happen to know the allies. So they want to try to demonize anything that is a social movement that would just be Ethiopian. How do we fight this? Well, let's see them try to fight an entire continent, because that is what is at stake. The message has to come through that if you attack one, you attack the family of Africa. And we have to organize this now.
In our final African news, thousands of Angolan paid tribute on Saturday to former President José Eduardo dos Santos, who died on July 8th in a clinic in Barcelona. The funeral procession left the dos Santos family home in Luanda, traveling through the city to the Republic of Square, where the burial will take place on Sunday. José Eduardo dos Santos was 79 years old and died following a long illness. He ruled Angola for almost 40 years. On the streets of the capital city, many remember him fondly. The former president will be buried with full military honors in a ceremony attended by representatives of 18 countries, including former colonial power Portugal and the UN. And now a recap of the top stories once again. States call upon the international community to condemn TPLF's continued attack. And Tigrayan journalist exposes TPLF misdirecting of international aid. Once again, you've been watching ETV English Language with Anusa and Binyam Gitana. Thank you for joining us and have a lovely time ahead. Goodbye for now.